Hello, welcome back to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and it is time for a weekly wrap-up. So believe it or not, today I started out with a winter coat and boots and gloves, and now I am here and see that bright sunshine coming in through my whatever that thing is called, sunroof. Sleeveless, hot, ridiculous. So yeah, I packed an extra pair of shoes so I could take off my boots after I was done with helping with Caroline at school in the morning, and then wore layers so I could remove as necessary. And here we are. So I finished reading Isabelle and Alexander, to get on to our reading topics for the week. I finished reading Isabelle and Alexander. The author's name is Rebecca Anderson, I believe. Anyway, because the storyline was a little heavier than just a run-of-the-mill, like fluffy read. So it starts with an arranged marriage, and initially, like, it's all told from the girl's perspective, the girl in the story. And initially she's just trying to, like, she's young and naive, and she only knows what she's been told to expect from marriage, but she really doesn't have any idea how it's going to work out. And in the end, her husband he just seems very distant and cool towards her. And you begin to understand through the narration, although she doesn't understand, you begin to understand through her observation that really he feels inferior to her, and he doesn't know how to approach her. He's like, really unsure of himself and insecure, and that's why he seems so aloof. But she doesn't understand any of that. And so she's trying to navigate these tricky waters, and she has an attitude that she genuinely wants her marriage to be successful, but she's not sure how to go about that. So she is trying her best. And then tragedy strikes, and there's a horrible accident. And they have to learn to navigate not only a marriage that was, a marriage in name only to start with, but now the added stress, which even, a solid, successful marriage would crumble under. The added struggle of caring for an invalid, and all of the attendant issues that brings. So it was very well done in that respect. As much as the character goes through, the girl goes through a lot of character development throughout the story, but at the same time, like, she learns very quickly from every mistake that she makes, every situation she goes through, like almost a little too quickly to be realistic. Like, a real person, I feel, would struggle much more significantly with everything that life gets thrown at her. But it's like she's very easily adaptable and kind of like, the ninja warrior of struggling marriages, so to speak. Like, fling that club at me, got it. Here's a board. I just tore it in two, or chopped it in two with my bare hands. But with her marriage, oh, fling that foul attitude at me. Oh, I understand. I know that your foul attitude is because you feel this way. So she kind of just, she grows rapidly, in an unlikely way. But it was an interesting story. It kept me reading all the way through to the end. I guess I didn't find it as emotionally involving as some people did. I think I maybe had a tear in my eye a time or two. It was set in Manchester, and so the husband is the owner of a mill, so you got to see, like, the first-hand inner workings of a Victorian era mill, so that was interesting. So overall, I don't remember how many stars I gave it on Goodreads. Oh, I don't think I put it on Goodreads yet, actually, now that I think about it. So I probably give it like 3.5-ish stars. So it wasn't bad. I mean, it was what it was. It wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was. And for what it was good. How's that? How's that for an excellent review? And then I also read, because tonight is the book club discussion on The Raven. I read that poem last night, and which I have read before, and I read it again last night. And I do love me some Edgar Allan Poe, at least the poetry. I don't know about his stories, but his poetry I do like. But I was reading an article about it online, and in the comments someone said, and I did not investigate to see if this was true, it may be a highly contested piece of information, but this person said that there is strong evidence that Edgar Allan Poe did not actually write that poem. I know that would be like earth-shattering, right? Like it's one of his most famous ones. That actually the younger brother of John Greenleaf Whittier wrote that poem. And that Edgar Allan Poe came across it in his role as editor, I believe, of some publication, and he scooped it and took it as his own. And that had something to do with the fact that Whittier was involved in abolition and the freeing of slaves through the Underground Railroad and everything. So he did not want his name to be published or whatever. So he never sued or pursued the issue. But there is some speculation that Edgar Allan Poe so he left another journal or whatever that he was editor of or involved in shortly after that, and there's some people surmise that it was because he was fired for stealing this poem. I don't know. I mean, it definitely seems to have similarities to his other poetry, so I don't know. Who even knows? But it was definitely very interesting. And I'm hoping next Friday I have a day off, and I'm hoping that we will be able to go to Baltimore, Maryland, to Edgar Allan Poe's house there and go to the museum. We'll see, and definitely I will keep you posted about that and give a little video about that if we end up going. So anyway, that is my progress for this week. I'm currently reading The Five, which is a nonfiction book about the 5 women who are known to have been killed by Jack the Ripper. It is very interesting. I am only on the second victim right now, but I will tell you all about it when I am finished reading it, which will hopefully be in a few days, and I'll get that clip on this video. In addition to that, I'm reading John Plowman's Talks by Charles Haddon Spurgeon, which is basically a short little book with practical advice for life from a biblical perspective. The first chapter was on idleness, and oh my goodness, I'll have to read some quotes maybe later on this week when I have finished the whole book and can post a whole review. So, very interesting. I am wrapping up all of my very Ann Victober plans. I don't have anything else, I think, that I have to read to fill a prompt. So, I think I have checked off all of those boxes, but I have a couple ones that I started and didn't finish that I will probably try to finish before we actually get to the end of October. So we'll see what else I get up to this week, but that is my progress so far as of Tuesday, and I'll make another clip as I read the next books. So, see you next time.
Hello. If I look a little tired, it's because it is a Friday evening, Friday night at 10:30, and it has been a pleasant day, but a long day, the end of a very busy week. And I am only filming this now because I just finished the book I was reading, and my kids are in bed, and my husband is at a hockey game with a friend, and so I am effectively by myself and with nothing otherwise to do. And tomorrow I'm going to be even busier, so got a packed schedule. So I want to get this done and then have everything ready to go for this week's wrap up. Well, first of all, today was a good day. We had Grandparents' Day at school, and so it was busy, but it was very good busy. And my students, 2 different elementary classes, sang some songs for their grandparents, so that was good. So Grandparents' Day went well, and then we went to senior night for the high school volleyball team, the varsity volleyball team, but it was like an hour after school started, so we had a little time to kill. So my boys and I went to a local coffee shop bakery, and I let them buy a treat. And as we were checking out, the lady was like, "Would you like a free slice of cake for our anniversary?" And I was like, what kind of question is that? I mean, let's just hand it over. So, oh my goodness. I just had one bite, but it was amazing. It was like a 3-layer white cake with I think the frosting was just like whipped cream. And it reminded me a lot actually of a tres leches cake, but the cake itself wasn't like doused in milk or anything. And, but it definitely evoked that flavor. And then on the top were like little pieces of fresh fruit, berries, and blueberry, a strawberry, and a raspberry. Anyway, it was so good, but I just took one bite. Surprisingly, neither of my children wanted to eat it at the time. Such self-restraint. I won't tell you what the 12-year-old had already admitted to eating that day in terms of sugary things. So it is currently residing in the refrigerator, tempting me, but I'm not gonna be home all day tomorrow, so it can sit in the refrigerator all it wants. The boys will have to fight over it. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything. I just finished reading The Five by Hallie. Last name starts with an R and has a few syllables, but it's not coming to me. And it is about the 5 known victims of Jack the Ripper, the ones who are generally supposed to have been killed by him. There are others that maybe were, maybe were not, but these are the 5 that they're pretty sure that he killed. In the fall of 1888 in London, England. And this book was interesting in that it was not about the crime itself. In fact, the story of each woman's life kind of fades to black, so to speak, when it gets to the point where they were murdered. And while the author draws heavily from the records of the investigations by the detectives for the information in the book, really not much time is given to the actual murders, which was her intent. Her intent was to shine the light on the actual women and clear up mysteries and myths that had been surrounding them for the past 100+ years since they were killed, and suppositions people made about them. So her main one being that many people just assume, partly because that was kind of the rumor spread at the time, that they were all prostitutes, which there's really not much evidence to back that up, except that one of them was, the last victim was a known prostitute. There was no evidence of of a sexual crime being committed at the time they were murdered. And the murders happened, and subsequent mutilating happened so quickly based on the evidence that was collected, the eyewitnesses, the timing of everything. The murders happened so quickly that there really wasn't time for that sort of thing. And so it didn't seem to be that these women were lured to a place, by means of, a solicitation or something, in fact, well, one more reason why this author doesn't believe that they were prostitutes, except for the one who was known to be for sure, is that the coroner on all of their death certificates wrote out their various professions or positions, and something was written for each of them, except for the very last one was labeled prostitute. So if it had been proven that that's what they were, then they would have been labeled as such as their profession, but they weren't. So one more theory by this author, which makes total sense to me and seems to be common sense, honestly, is that these women were all asleep, in fact, when they were attacked and killed. Again, based on the fact that it happened so quickly and that there were no defensive wounds at all. So basically what all of these women did have in common was that they had all sunk to a very deep level of poverty. They didn't all start out that way, but they had sunk to a very deep level of poverty. Essentially, they were homeless and lived their days trying to earn a few pennies to rent a bed at night in one of the lodging houses in the poorer areas of London, the Whitechapel area. And so they all shared a similar level of poverty, and they all tragically were alcoholics. And that was a defining aspect of their character as described by the people who knew them at the time that they passed away. So ultimately that is what led them to their deaths, because again, the author theorizes, and I think with good reason, that these women were basically essentially in drunken stupors, and all but the last one were literally sleeping on the street when they were attacked. So they not only were they on the street and sleeping completely defenseless, but they were drunk. So easily taken advantage of, and easily, they may not have even awakened before it happened. So just really, really sad. And reading about the tragic lives of these women was really hard, actually. Some of them, it's like they started out their life with a certain amount of hope, or at least their adult life with a certain amount of hope for the future, with plans and means whereby they could get ahead, at least to a certain extent. They were all members of the working class. And each one of them, something went wrong, and chain of events, one thing led to another, and by the time they were all like in their mid-40s, I think, by that time they were all on the street, basically, getting lodging wherever they could for the most part. So it was kind of a hard read in that sense. Each of their lives was obviously ended tragically, but even more than that, their whole lives just seemed to have a certain amount of hopelessness in them. The one that tugged on my heartstrings the most, that was the hardest to read, was the one, Annie Chapman was her name. So Annie Chapman, her father had been a valet, which is a pretty high in the ranking of servants. And so a little bit above the rank of most of the other people in this story. And Unfortunately, there was a tragedy in the family. Scarlet fever went through the area where they lived, and 3 of her younger siblings died, like within weeks. And the author surmises, and again, I would agree with this conclusion, that the tragedy, she just never really recovered and healed from it. On top of which, I don't know how long it was after that, but at some point after that, her father committed suicide. And so then the mother and her oldest children that were remaining were left to pick up the pieces of their life and move on. But it seems like most of her family was able to overcome all of that tragedy, and not the least because her 2 sisters, maybe, a missionary or a mission or something, a Presbyterian church, somehow they became believers at some point in their lives, and they became devout believers, actually. And I don't know about the mom, but I definitely know the 2 sisters did. And the mom, with some money that her husband's former employee settled on her, opened up a boarding house and was able to support herself. Her daughters worked for her for a while, and then her other daughters, they were either in service or in trade of some kind, and they managed to marry gentlemen who, well, not gentlemen in the sense of nobility, whatever, but men who were good guys and, actually had careers, whatever, that stable lives. So other people, the rest of her family seemed able to move on from the tragedy, but she started to drink heavily to help her handle that pain. But she did meet a coachman, and a coachman was also one of the higher ranking servants. And a coachman's position also often came with good housing. I mean, it was usually above the stables, but it was like a whole apartment with, like a sitting room, and it was fully furnished, and it was actually kind of nice place to live. Kind of, I guess, maybe if you think like a garage apartment in a really big, around here we call them McMansions. So she had a decent life. It got even better when her husband got a job for someone, a wealthy gentleman who had purchased an actual estate property outside of London. And that was an even cushier job. And it came with a carriage house where they lived. And for the people in this book, like that, like an actual whole entire house in the country to yourself, like that's riches, unbelievable. So I am talking way too much about this, so I'm going to try and just sum up here. So unfortunately, though, for Annie, even though like prospects looked so good for her, they started out their married life with so much hope. It seemed to be going well. She and her husband had a really beautiful relationship, and they loved each other, and he loved her so much, but she could not overcome her alcoholism. And her siblings and probably her husband's employer paid for her to go to, what do they call it? A sanitarium nearby, where she lived for a year and went through basically was rehab. And so she rehabbed, and they considered her cured or whatever, and they released her. And she was fine for a while, but then her youngest child got sick with scarlet fever. Oh, and it just broke my heart, because at that point she spiraled down and nobody could help her. And it's like she just gave up at that point. And I really just want to cry right now, just thinking about it. The tragedy of it all. It was hard to read. I wish I don't know. I wish somebody could have helped her, but I know people tried. So she probably just, some people don't want to be helped. But it's so tragic to watch it happen. But anyways, she just spiraled down, and basically her husband's employer told him, listen, you have to do something about your wife or you're going to have to find another job. But here, his wife at this point was so bad that she couldn't even take care of their kids. So all the care of his children was left to him. So he had to keep his job to take care of his children. So he basically, they had like an amicable separation sort of thing, and he sent her off on her own, but he gave her an allowance that she collected at a post office box, I guess on a weekly basis. And and that was what she lived on, more or less, until he died. And then she was kind of left to her own devices. But it was not too long after that she died. So, heavy stories, hard to read, but really fascinating. And I'll just mention this, and then I'll be done and get this video ready to go. But this book is kind of like a slice of the working class life in Victorian times in England. Some of the stories of these women, you feel like you're reading a Dickens novel, and then you think, wow, Dickens really nailed it, because the research that the author does into the lives of these women, but also into every aspect of their lives, like the careers their families had or didn't have, or their lodging situations, how they worked, how they would have managed to procure their alcohol, and the ways that they would have earned money for getting a bed at night, and all of the stuff. It's just like a what do you call that? It's late and I can't think of the words, but like in a dollhouse, where it's you see the, what is that, across the word, it's not coming, but anyways, it's like you see. It's like you're looking in a dollhouse, but instead of a dollhouse, it's London in Victorian times, and you see the inner workings of it. And very, very fascinating. Also, it's interesting to see how many, these women, throughout the course of their lives, all of them at some point came into contact and or were helped by a wide variety of groups, of mission-minded groups, which just really was inspiring to me, because say what you will about the Victorians, but they were on a mission. Many of them, the Victorian Christians, many of them were on a mission, and they wanted to reach their world, whether it was their world in London or, the world across the ocean. And each of these women at some point was either helped by one of these ministries, or at least, crossed paths with them, because they were called to testify, and their different missionaries or whatever were called to testify what they knew of these victims. So I found that interesting also. And the pervasiveness of alcoholism and drunkenness in that working class culture of London is in a sense understandable, because of the hopelessness of their lives that many of them had, but also it helps you understand a little bit that Victorian mindset of that kind of crusading mindset of teetotalism and prohibition and how it led to that. And obviously prohibition wasn't the answer, but I kind of see why they would have felt like it was, because it was the cause of so much. It was a vicious cycle. The poor people in London were just caught in such a vicious cycle. Anyway, really profound book. The very last concluding chapter, and it's, this viewpoint is kind of sprinkled throughout the book. The very last chapter was kind of a little bit of a diatribe on on like a feminist diatribe, if you will, about how much worse it was for women back in Victorian times to get ahead or to whatever. And, you know, the littlest thing happens to them and, you know, then their whole life is done for and they just can't ever climb up out of their cycle of poverty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of the women in this story, I mean, some bad things just happened to them. Sometimes it was just chance and bad luck, but they all made choices that led them to where they were. One of the girls, she obviously had had an illicit relationship with someone, and while she was working as a servant girl. And then another time, again, where a family, I think it was a woman in it was a Baptist church, she and her husband purposely hired maids who were down on their luck, women in the community who needed something, who needed steady employment, who needed to rise up out of that cycle of poverty. They purposely hired maids for them to give them a steady income, gave them clothes to wear, and gave them their own bedroom, which was huge, first of all, and were very kind to them and honestly didn't give them a lot of work to do. It was like a dream life. But the woman, after a few months, couldn't handle the life of propriety that was required. And so she basically stole everything that the kind couple had given to her and left. So you can't blame, in that case, you can't blame the system. You can't blame the Christians. You can't blame anybody but her own poor choices, unfortunately. So anyway, so many thoughts reading the book. Obviously, I've been talking for 25 minutes. What in the world? Oof. So I highly recommend reading the book. I'm probably going to give it 4.5 stars on Goodreads just because of that whole slant that just, I didn't really agree with that perspective per se. Not to the fullest extent. I agree to a certain extent with qualifications. Anyway, it's a great book. I'm so glad I read it. And this is going to be a long wrap-up video this week, even though I read the grand total of 2 books. Wow. Okay. So I'll be very busy on Saturday. So I might get a little bit of reading in. It'll have to be on my Kindle because I'll be away from home. So I don't want to necessarily bring a book with me. So, like, you know, hard copy. So I need to find something else I want to read in my Kindle. And yeah, I guess I'll update with that next week. So thank you so much for listening to this rather lengthy diatribe, because I won't be doing a great deal of editing because I don't have time. And if you're still with me, thanks for hanging in there and sticking with me, and I will see you next time.
Okay, I know I said I am done with this week's wrap-up, but today I got a couple of things, acquired some new items, including books, and so exciting. I just wanted to show you what I got. So let me show you. So this beauty was being sold at an auction, and I was helping at said auction, and it was unclaimed. So I was able to take it home. Look at all those little nooks and crannies, and look at that. This opens up. So fun. And then look at that detailing there. So cute, right? Also unclaimed were some books, which there were a lot more books, but I just took a few. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep all of these. Some of these I might get for gifts, and some I might put on my Pango books, which I'm still working on getting started because time reasons. But anyways, there's this one, Devotions based on the Passion. And then this is Spanish. This is definitely one that I will sell, but it's really nice condition. A gift devotional. And then by Ruth Bell Graham, Prodigals and Those Who Love Them. Charles Stanley, How to Listen to God. I collect old hymnals. So this one, and this one is cool. It has signatures
I don't know if this was like people in the church who used it or what. The first one is 1944, section 6, row 4, seat 6. And then all of these others, I guess these are people who use this hymnal. I'm not really sure. If anybody knows anything about what these signatures mean, I just thought that that was really neat. I think I probably have versions of this hymnal already. I need to look, but anyway, I love old hymnals. And then this book just looked interesting. The Dead Sea Scrolls, a new translation, translated with commentary. Don't really know much about that, but it seemed interesting. I'm just dropping everything. And this, I did not even know that Ray Comfort had written a book on this topic. Hitler, God, and the Bible. So, interesting. And now for real, that concludes my weekly wrap up. Thank you all for joining me. I will see you next week, and let me know in the comments how I should fix up that little desk. Should I paint it? What kind of paint should I use? How should I do it? Never done that before. Let me know.